This ground holds bodies, the little girl told the millionaire in the cemetery. Then they discover something terrible. Let me know what you thought of this story in the comments with a rating from 0 to 10, and tell me what city you're watching from. I'd love to know if you enjoyed my story and get to know you better, so subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The May sun was setting lazily over Oakwood Municipal Cemetery in Cedar Creek when Theodore Vance knelt before the black granite tomb that held the remains of his parents. His hands trembled slightly as he placed a bouquet of white daisies, his mother's favorite flowers. At 30, the architect had built a real estate empire that impressed the entire region. But there, on that silent piece of land, he felt like an orphaned boy lost in the world. "Dad, Mom," he murmured softly, adjusting the dark glasses that hid his red eyes. "I don't know what to do anymore. The company grows, the money comes in, but this feeling of emptiness just gets bigger." The wind blew through the cypresses, carrying the scent of withered flowers and damp earth. Theodore closed his eyes, trying to feel some presence, some sign that he was not completely alone in this world. That's when a small, trembling voice cut through the afternoon silence. "Mister! Mister!" He opened his eyes and turned, finding a tiny figure standing a few feet away. It was a girl of no more than 4, with tangled, dirty brown hair, tattered clothes that had once been white, and bare feet caked in dry mud. Her large, dark eyes shone with a disturbing intensity for such a small child. "What are you doing here, little one?" Theodore asked, quickly wiping away his tears and standing up. "Where are your parents?" The girl didn't answer immediately. Instead, she pointed with her dirty little finger to an empty area of the cemetery, a vacant lot covered in dry grass about 50 yards away. Her expression was serious, almost solemn, as if she carried an immense weight on her small shoulders. "This ground holds bodies, mister," she whispered, her voice filled with a certainty that made Theodore's blood run cold. "What was that?" he asked, thinking he had misheard. He walked over to the girl, crouching down to her level. "What did you say?" "There are children sleeping there," she repeated, still pointing to the empty lot. "They talk to me. They say they're cold, that they want someone to know they exist." A shiver ran down Theodore's spine. He looked where the girl was pointing, seeing only a neglected lawn and a few sparse trees, nothing to indicate any kind of burial or irregularity. "What's your name, little one?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm as he studied the child's serious face. "Lily," she answered. "My name is Lily Evans. My grandma disappeared a long time ago, and now I live on the streets. How long have you been alone?" "3 moons, Lily said, using a way of counting time that touched Theodore's heart. "Grandma Eleanor went to get medicine and never came back. I waited and waited, but she didn't show up." Theodore felt his chest tighten. The girl's situation was desperate, but there was something more disturbing in her words about buried bodies. He knew that area of the cemetery well. His construction company had even considered expanding operations to adjacent land a few years ago. "Lily, why do you think there are people buried there?" The girl stared at him with her large, serious eyes. "Because I hear the whispers from the earth, mister. I've heard them since I was little. Grandma said it was a special gift, but also a curse." "Whispers from the earth?" "Yeah," she nodded gravely. "The earth tells secrets to those who know how to listen, and there are many secrets buried there. Children who never got to grow up, who were forgotten by the world." Theodore remained crouched, observing this extraordinary girl who spoke of impossible things with the casualness of someone commenting on the weather. There was something in the sincerity of her voice, in the intensity of her eyes, that prevented him from simply dismissing her words as childish fantasy. "Are you hungry, Lily?" he finally asked. "I am," she admitted, lowering her eyes for the first time. "It's been 2 days since I've eaten anything but scraps I found in the trash." Theodore's heart broke. Regardless of the girl's strange claims about buried bodies, she was a desperate child who needed immediate help. He stood up and extended his hand to her. "Come with me, we'll get you something to eat." Lily hesitated for a moment, studying Theodore's face as if trying to read his soul. Finally, she took his hand with her small, dirty, cold fingers. "Are you going to help me make the children stop crying?" she asked as they walked toward the cemetery gate. "What children, Lily?" "The ones buried over there," she said, looking over her shoulder at the empty lot. "They cry every night. They cry because no one remembers them, because no one knows they're there." Theodore swallowed hard, a strange feeling settling in his stomach. There was something in the girl's conviction that deeply disturbed him, and as absurd as it seemed, he felt a growing need to find out if there was any truth behind her unsettling words. As he helped Lily into his car, Theodore cast one last glance at the lot she had pointed to. For a moment, he had the strange impression that the wind carried distant echoes of children's voices. He shook his head, trying to dismiss such morbid thoughts, but he couldn't completely ignore the feeling that his life was about to change irreversibly. Lily settled into the passenger seat, her small feet dangling in the air, and murmured something that made Theodore's blood run cold once more. "The children said you're the right person. They said you'll help them find peace." The guest apartment Theodore kept in one of his construction company's buildings had never received such a peculiar visitor. Lily Evans sat on the edge of the beige sofa, her large eyes scanning every corner of the clean, organized room as if it were a palace. Her dirty little hands contrasted with the elegance of the furniture, but Theodore didn't care. There was something about this girl that awakened a protective instinct he didn't know he possessed. "You can take a shower while I order some food," he said, showing her the bathroom. "There are clean towels and soap. Then we can talk more about what you saw at the cemetery." Lily nodded silently and disappeared into the bathroom. Theodore took the opportunity to call his favorite restaurant and order a child's meal, but his mind couldn't detach from the girl's disturbing words. Bodies buried in a vacant lot? Whispers from the earth? As absurd as it sounded, there was something in Lily's sincerity that deeply troubled him. While he waited, Theodore opened his laptop and began to research the area of the cemetery Lily had pointed out. In the city's digital archives, he discovered that the land had had several owners over the years, but curiously, it had never been developed for official burials. It was as if there were an inexplicable resistance to using that piece of land. When Lily came out of the shower, wrapped in a towel too big for her, Theodore's heart ached. Clean, it was possible to see that she was a beautiful girl with delicate features, but there were signs of malnutrition on her fragile little body. He had bought some children's clothes from the store on the ground floor of the building while the food was on its way. "Lily," he said, as she dressed in a pink t-shirt and small jeans, "tell me more about your grandmother. What was her full name?" "Eleanor Evans," Lily replied, struggling with the buttons on her pants. "She took care of me since I was born. My mom left when I was a baby, and my dad. Grandma said he never really existed." "And where did you live?" "In a small house behind old Miller's boarding house near downtown. Grandma worked cleaning houses, but sometimes she got very sad. She said she carried secrets that were too heavy for one person." Theodore made a mental note. After Lily ate and rested, he would go to this boarding house to investigate the grandmother's disappearance. "Lily, about what you feel in that area of the cemetery. Can you explain to me how it works?" The girl stopped struggling with the buttons and looked at him seriously. "It's like the earth is a person speaking very softly. When I step on places where things are buried, I feel a tingling in my feet and I hear voices. They're not voices of living people, they're different." "And does this only happen at the cemetery?" No, it happens in a lot of places. Grandma once took me to a lot where they were going to build a school, and I felt the same thing. She got very nervous and pulled me away from there quickly. A chill ran through Theodore. His construction company had participated in the bid for that school 2 years ago, but the project was mysteriously cancelled at the last minute without convincing explanations from the city hall. The food arrived, and Lily ate with a voracity that was heartbreaking. Between bites, she continued talking about her strange ability. Grandma said I inherited it from my great-grandmother, who also heard the whispers, but she said it was dangerous, that there were people who didn't want these secrets to be discovered. What kind of people? I don't know. Powerful people. Grandma always got nervous when she talked about it. Theodore decided to test a theory. Lily, do you want to go with me tomorrow to take a look at that area of the cemetery? In the daytime, calmly. The girl's eyes widened. You believe me? I don't know yet, he admitted honestly, but I want to find out. That night, Theodore set Lily up in the guest room, placing an extra mattress on the floor next to the bed in case she had nightmares. He himself barely slept, his mind racing between concern for the girl and curiosity about her impossible claims. At 3 a.m, he was awakened by muffled screams coming from Lily's room. He ran there and found her sitting up in bed, sweating and trembling. "What is it, little one?" They were crying louder, Lily whispered, clinging to his arm. "The buried children, they know you're going to help, but they're scared." Scared of what? Of the man who put them there. They say he's still around, that he doesn't want anyone to find them. Theodore felt a shiver run down his spine. "Lily, these are just nightmares. You've been through a lot of trauma." It's not a nightmare," she interrupted, her large eyes fixed on his. "They showed me. It was a place with lots of children, a big place. There was a man in black clothes who hurt them, and when they got very sick, he buried them in that ground." Theodore's blood ran cold. Black clothes could mean a priest or a religious figure, and a place with lots of children. "Lily, this place you saw, was it like a school? A big house?" "It was a very, very big house, with many rooms and a small chapel, and it had a big cross in front." "An orphanage?" Theodore vaguely remembered hearing about an old orphanage in Cedar Creek that had closed decades ago. If his memory served him right, it had been closed after a fire, but there had always been rumors of irregularities at the place. "Can you remember anything else? The man in black clothes had a strange name. The children called him Father something. Father Augustine?" The name echoed in Theodore's mind like a funeral bell. Father Augustine Morris had been a controversial figure in the city decades ago. Theodore remembered his father commenting on scandals involving the clergyman, but always in a hushed tone, as if it were dangerous to speak openly about the matter. "Lily, you need to try to sleep. Tomorrow we'll investigate all of this together. You promise you won't leave me?" she asked, holding tightly to his t-shirt sleeve. "I promise," Theodore replied, and realized he truly meant it. In just a few hours, this girl had awakened feelings in him he didn't know he possessed. "No one will hurt you while I'm around." Lily finally relaxed and managed to go back to sleep. Theodore stayed for a few more minutes watching her, thinking about how his life had completely changed in a single day. In the morning, he would begin an investigation that he suspected went far beyond simple childhood fantasies. As he returned to his room, he couldn't help but look out the window in the direction of the cemetery. Even from a distance, and in the darkness, he could vaguely make out the area Lily had pointed to. And for an irrational moment, he had the impression of seeing small lights dancing over that land, as if they were restless souls trying to get his attention. He shook his head, convincing himself it was just a product of his overactive imagination. But deep in his heart, He was beginning to suspect that Lily Evans carried with her more disturbing truths than any adult would be prepared to face. The next morning arrived laden with an anxiety that Theodore couldn't hide. After a quiet breakfast, where Lily ate pancakes with the same voracity as the night before, the two headed to the cemetery. The girl walked by his side with determined steps, as if it were a mission she had been waiting for a long time. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Theodore asked when they reached the main gate. "The children are waiting," Lily replied simply. "They know today is the day." They walked down the main path until they reached the area Lily had pointed to the previous afternoon. In the daylight, the lot seemed even more ordinary. Just neglected grass, a few scattered rocks and sparse trees. Nothing to suggest any irregularity. "It's here," Lily said, stopping abruptly and pointing to a specific spot. "There's a girl under there. Her name is Rose, and she has long hair. She died of a fever." Theodore felt a knot in his stomach. The naturalness with which Lily spoke of such morbid things was disturbing. "How do you know her name?" "She told me. She said she was 7 when she went to sleep and never woke up again." With his heart racing, Theodore knelt and began to examine the soil at the spot Lily indicated. To his surprise, the earth there seemed different, softer, as if it had been turned over at some point. He picked up a dry branch and began to dig superficially. After a few minutes, his hand touched something that made him freeze. A piece of discolored fabric, possibly part of a child's dress. "My God," he murmured, his hands trembling as he held the fabric. "Did you find Rose?" Lily asked, approaching. "She's happy. She said no one has touched her things in a long time." Theodore looked at the girl, then at the fabric in his hands, feeling a mixture of terror and compassion. If this was really part of a dress from a child buried decades ago. "Lily, I need you to show me where else there are, where else you feel these presences." The girl nodded and began to walk through the area, stopping at different points as if following an invisible map. "There's a boy here. Here there are 2 little sisters who died together, and over there, near that tree, there are many children together." Theodore followed her, mentally marking each spot she indicated. In total, Lily pointed out 12 different spots in an area of approximately 200 square yards. If she was right, that lot was practically a clandestine children's cemetery. "Theodore!" A familiar voice made him turn sharply. It was Evan Campbell, his partner at the construction company, approaching with a confused expression on his face. Evan was a 45-year-old man, with graying hair and always impeccably dressed, who had known Theodore since college. "Evan, what are you doing here?" "I came to visit my grandfather's grave," he replied, but his eyes were fixed on Lily and the piece of fabric Theodore was still holding. "And you? Who's this girl?" Theodore hesitated. He didn't know how to explain the situation without sounding completely insane. "It's a long story. This is Lily. I'm helping her." "Oh," Evan said, but there was something strange in his tone. "And what exactly are you two doing here in this area?" "Just exploring," Theodore answered evasively. Evan came closer and Theodore noticed that his partner seemed nervous. "Theodore, you know this area has some legal problems, right? Complicated property issues. It would be better for you to stay away from here." "What kind of problems?" "Old disputes, confusing paperwork. Nothing you need to worry about." Lily, who had remained quiet, suddenly pulled on Theodore's sleeve. "He knows," she whispered, but loud enough for Evan to hear. "He knows about the children." Evan's face visibly paled. "What is this girl talking about?" "Lily has a very active imagination," Theodore said quickly, trying to defuse the situation. But Lily continued to stare at Evan with her large, penetrating eyes. "You know the man in black clothes. You have the same smell as him." "What man in black clothes?" Evan asked, but his voice trembled slightly. "Father Augustine. Lily replied naturally. The children remember him, and they remember you too. Theodore saw the impact of the words on his partner's face. Evan took a step back, as if he had been slapped. I have to go, Evan stammered. Theodore, we'll talk later, and please keep that girl away from here. Evan walked away quickly, almost running, leaving Theodore completely confused. His partner had reacted to Lily's words as if she had touched a deep wound. Lily, how did you know he knew Father Augustine? The children told me. They say he was very little when it all happened, but that the father was his relative, and that he carries the same fear in his heart. Theodore knelt in front of the girl. Lily, are you absolutely sure about these things you're telling me? I am, she answered with conviction. The voices never lie. They just want someone to know the truth. Theodore spent the rest of the morning carefully digging at 2 more spots indicated by Lily. In both, he found pieces of fabric, small personal objects, and in one of them, something that made him nauseous, small bones that seemed to belong to a child. We need to go to the police, he said, carefully placing the evidence in plastic bags. No, Lily said firmly. Not yet. There are more things you need to know first. What things? About your own family. The children know things about your father that you don't. Theodore's blood ran cold. My father. What do they know about my father? That he kept secrets. Secrets about what happened to them. Secrets he passed on to you without you knowing. That's impossible. My father was an architect like me. He never had anything to do with... He had papers hidden at home, Lily interrupted. Papers that prove he knew about the buried children. The voices showed me where they are. Theodore felt the ground sway beneath his feet. If Lily was right, if his father had really kept evidence of crimes against children. Where? He asked, his voice hoarse. In the house where you grew up. In his office. There's a secret place behind the bookshelf. Theodore knew that office like the back of his hand. He had spent countless childhood afternoons there, watching his father work. If there really was a secret compartment behind the bookshelf. Let's go, he said, taking Lily by the hand. Where to? To my parents' house. If you're right about this, if there really are documents hidden there, I need to find them before it's too late. As they walked back to the car, Theodore couldn't stop thinking about Evan's reaction. His partner had behaved like a man with dangerous secrets, and the connection Lily had made between him and Father Augustine seemed to have touched on something very real and very frightening. What he didn't know was that while they were driving to his childhood home, Evan Campbell was making an urgent call from a payphone, his voice trembling with panic. He found the girl, he said to someone on the other end of the line. Eleanor's girl. She knows everything. We need to act quickly before it's too late. The house where Theodore had grown up remained untouched since his parents' passing, like a museum of memories he rarely visited. Located in an upscale neighborhood of Cedar Creek, the 2-story residence had a well-kept garden thanks to the gardener he paid monthly, but the interior held the smell of abandonment and longing. Is this where you lived when you were little? Lily asked, her large eyes scanning the elegant facade of the house. It is, Theodore replied, his voice heavy with melancholy. My parents loved this house. My mother used to say that every room had its own soul. Upon opening the door, a rush of still air greeted them. Theodore turned on the lights and led Lily to his father's office, a large room dominated by a mahogany bookshelf that took up an entire side wall. The shelves were filled with books on architecture, law, and local history. It's there, Lily said, pointing directly at the bookshelf. Behind the old books, on the right side, there's a drawer your father used to hide. Theodore approached the bookshelf, his heart pounding. He knew those books by heart. He had leafed through many of them during his teenage years. He began to remove the volumes from the area Lily indicated, stacking them carefully on the floor. After removing about 20 books, his hands touched something different, a small metal lever embedded in the wood. When he pulled it, he heard a soft click, and a section of the bookshelf swung open like a secret door. "How did you know this existed?" he murmured, incredulous. "The voices know many things," Lily replied. "They showed me your father hiding important papers there when you were very little." Inside the secret compartment, Theodore found a brown leather folder, several old photographs, and documents yellowed with age. With trembling hands, he opened the folder and began to examine the contents. The first page took his breath away. It was a birth certificate for a child named Rose Miller, born in 1952 and registered as deceased in 1959 at St. Vincent's Home for Children. The same Rose that Lily had mentioned was buried in the cemetery. "My God," Theodore whispered, flipping through more documents. There were dozens of similar certificates, all for children who had lived at the orphanage between 1950 and 1965. Each one recorded suspicious circumstances of death, sudden fevers, unexplained accidents, illnesses that other children didn't contract. "Your father knew everything," Lily said, approaching to see the papers. "He was the orphanage's lawyer when he was young. He found out that Father Augustine was hurting the children and hiding them when they died." Theodore found a handwritten letter on his father's letterhead, dated 1985. "My conscience no longer allows me to carry this burden alone. The children of St. Vincent's Home for Children were victims of criminal negligence and possibly abuses that resulted in their premature deaths. Father Augustine Morris ordered the clandestine burial of the bodies to avoid investigation. I, as a young, inexperienced lawyer, was coerced into falsifying documents and maintaining silence. I keep this evidence as a testament to my own cowardice and in the hope that one day someone with more courage than I can bring justice to these innocent children." Theodore's hands trembled as he read. His father, the man he had always admired as an example of righteousness, had been an accomplice to a terrible cover-up. "He regretted it a lot," Lily said softly. "That's why he hid the papers. He wanted someone in the family to find them one day and do what he didn't have the courage to do." Theodore continued to examine the documents and found something even more shocking. Architectural plans of the old orphanage and detailed maps showing exactly where each child had been buried on the land that was now part of the municipal cemetery. "Lily, according to these maps, there are 23 children buried in that area," he said, his voice hoarse. 23 little lives that were erased from history. "I know. They told me. Some were only 3 years old." Among the photographs, Theodore found images of the orphanage in operation. Thin, sad children posing in front of an imposing building, and several photos of Father Augustine Morris, a tall, thin man with cold eyes who smiled at the camera with an expression that made Theodore's skin crawl. But it was the last photograph that left him completely paralyzed. It was an image from a law school graduation ceremony from 1970. His father appeared young and smiling next to other graduates, among them a young man Theodore recognized immediately. It was Evan Campbell, about 40 years younger. "Evan studied with my father," he murmured. "They knew each other since they were young." "And your friend's grandfather was Father Augustine," Lily said. "That's why he got scared when he saw me. He knows the truth is being discovered." Theodore sat heavily in the office chair, trying to process all the information. His partner and best friend was the grandson of the man responsible for the premature deaths of 23 children. His own father had been an accomplice to the cover-up. And now he, through a 4-year-old girl with inexplicable abilities, was uncovering secrets that powerful people wanted to keep buried forever. "What do I do now?" he asked, more to himself than to Lily. "You bring justice," and she replied with conviction. "You give peace to the children who have been crying for so long." Theodore was organizing the documents when he heard the sound of a car stopping in front of the house. He looked out the window and saw Evan getting out of his black Mercedes, accompanied by an older man he didn't recognize. "Lily, we need to get out of here now," he said urgently, putting all the documents in the folder. "Evan's here, and he's not alone." "He came for the papers," Lily said, her eyes widening in fear. "The children are warning me. The man with him is dangerous." Theodore heard footsteps approaching the front door, and then the sound of the doorbell. Then Evan's voice, "Theodore, I know you're in there. We need to talk." "Let's go out the back," Theodore whispered, picking Lily up and heading towards the back of the house. But before they could leave, they heard the sound of shattering glass. Evan had broken one of the living room windows and was forcing his way into the house. "Theodore!" Evan shouted, his voice echoing through the corridors. "You don't understand the gravity of what you're doing. There are people who won't allow these secrets to come to light." Theodore managed to get out the back with Lily and ran to the car, stashing the folder in the trunk. When he started the engine, he saw Evan emerging in the backyard through the rearview mirror, accompanied by the strange man. "He's not going to give up," Lily said as they drove away quickly. "The children say there's a lot of money involved, that there are important people who will lose a lot if the truth comes out." "What kind of important people?" "People from the city hall, people who buy land, people who build houses where the children are sleeping." A coldness settled in Theodore's stomach. His own construction company had bought several plots of land in the region in recent years. What if some of them also hid similar secrets? As he drove aimlessly, trying to organize his thoughts, Theodore realized he had become the guardian of an explosive truth. In his hands was the evidence that could bring justice to 23 children forgotten by history. But he was also aware that this same evidence could destroy his own life and put both him and Lily in mortal danger. The phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Hello?" "Mr. Vance," said a hoarse, threatening voice. "I strongly advise you to return the documents that don't belong to you. There are very serious consequences for those who meddle in matters that should remain buried." Theodore hung up the phone with trembling hands and drove aimlessly through the streets of Cedar Creek for almost an hour, trying to process the threat he had received. Lily remained silent beside him, occasionally closing her eyes as if listening to voices only she could perceive. "We need to find a safe place," he finally murmured, stopping at an isolated gas station on the outskirts of the city. "The children say you have a friend," Lily said suddenly. "A woman who takes care of hurt people. She can help us." Theodore frowned. "How do you know about—" "She has gray hair and kind eyes. She lives in a small house with lots of plants. You used to visit her when you were young." Theodore's heart warmed as he recognized the description. Mrs. Celeste Reed had been like a second mother to him during his teenage years, especially after his parents started traveling frequently for work. She was a retired nurse and had always been a confidant in difficult times. "Mrs. Celeste," he whispered, "but how did you—" "The voices showed me. They trust her." 20 minutes later, Theodore was parking in front of Mrs. Celeste's simple but welcoming house. The 68-year-old woman appeared at the door before he even knocked, as if she had been waiting for them. "Theodore, my boy," she exclaimed, hugging him warmly. "And who is this little princess?" "Mrs. Celeste, this is Lily. We need your help. We're in a very complicated situation." Mrs. Celeste welcomed them into her small but comfortable living room, serving orange juice and homemade cookies, while Theodore recounted everything he had discovered in the last 24 hours. The retired nurse listened in silence, her experienced eyes studying both Theodore and Lily attentively. "My God," she said when Theodore finished, "I always knew there was something wrong back then. I worked at the municipal hospital in the 60s, And I remember children from the orphanage coming in with strange injuries, always with the same explanation: accidents during playtime. You treated these children? A few times. But Father Augustine always insisted they be treated by a specific doctor, Dr. Arthur Sterling. I never understood why he didn't allow any doctor to see them. Lily, who had remained quiet, suddenly stood up and walked to the window. "Someone is watching the house," she said naturally. Theodore and Mrs. Celeste rushed to the window. Across the street, partially hidden behind a tree, was a man in a dark suit, talking on the phone while watching the house. "How did you know he was there?" Mrs. Celeste asked, impressed. "The children warned me. They can see things that adults can't." Mrs. Celeste studied Lily with renewed interest. "Child, may I ask you a few questions?" "You can. When you hear these voices, do you feel anything in your body?" "I feel a tingling in my head, and sometimes my vision gets strange, like I'm looking through water." Mrs. Celeste nodded thoughtfully. "Theodore, I'd like to examine this girl. With your permission, of course." In the following minutes, Mrs. Celeste conducted a basic examination of Lily, checking her reflexes, pulse, and pupillary reactions. During the exam, she asked several questions about when the hearing episodes began and how they manifested. "Lily, dear, you know there's something very special happening in your brain, don't you?" Mrs. Celeste said gently. "It's not a bad thing, but it's different from most people. Grandma said I was special. Your grandmother was right. You have a condition that allows your brain to pick up very weak electrical signals. It's like you're a very sensitive radio that can hear frequencies other people can't." Theodore approached, interested. "What does that mean?" "It means that when Lily says she hears buried things, she's likely detecting residual electromagnetic fields from metal objects in the ground. Many old clothes had buckles, buttons, or other metal elements that can create these fields. So she can really detect where things are buried." "It's very likely. And if she can also get impressions about these discoveries, it may be that her mind is processing information in an unconventional way, creating narratives based on subtle environmental cues." Lily listened to the explanation attentively, then shook her head. "It's not just that. The voices are real. They tell me things no one else knows." Mrs. Celeste smiled gently. "I'm not saying you're making it up, dear. I'm just explaining that your brain works in a special way that allows you to perceive things others can't." Theodore's phone rang again. This time it was Evan. "Theodore, stop running from me. We need to talk like adults. After you broke into my parents' house, I have nothing to say to you. You don't understand the gravity of the situation. There are 50 years of investments, urban developments and city planning involved in this. If you expose these documents, you'll destroy not only me, but hundreds of families who bought properties in the region. And the 23 children who were murdered? Don't they matter?" "They weren't murdered," Evan exploded. "It was medical negligence in a different era. My grandfather made mistakes, but he wasn't a criminal." "Then why hide the bodies? Why falsify documents?" Evan paused for a long time. Because he was afraid. The city was growing, there was political pressure, and he thought it would be better to avoid a scandal." "Liar," Lily said, loud enough for Evan to hear through the phone. "Who said that?" "The girl you tried to scare in the cemetery. She says you're lying." "Theodore, that child is messing with your head. She needs medical help, not you feeding her fantasies. What do you know about her grandmother, Evan? What happened to Eleanor Evans?" Another long silence. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Liar again," Lily said, even louder. "Theodore!" Evan's voice grew more serious, almost threatening. "You have 24 hours to return the documents and stop this investigation. After that, I can no longer protect you from the people who really control this situation." The call was cut. Theodore looked at Mrs. Celeste and Lily, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. "Mrs. Celeste, I need to ask you a huge favor. Can I leave Lily here with you while I go investigate what happened to her grandmother?" "Of course, my boy. But where do you plan to look?" Theodore thought of Lily's words about her grandmother going to get medicine and never coming back. "I'll start with the hospitals and clinics in the area. If Eleanor Evans is alive, she might be hospitalized somewhere against her will." "I don't want you to go alone," Lily said, grabbing his arm. "It will be dangerous, little one. It's better if you stay here with Mrs. Celeste. The children say you're going to need me. They know where Grandma is." Theodore looked into the girl's determined eyes and realized she would not be dissuaded. Besides, if she really had the ability to detect things he couldn't, maybe he really did need her help. "All right," he said finally, "but we'll be very careful." As they prepared to leave, Mrs. Celeste held Theodore's arm. "My boy, are you sure you want to mess with this? These people seem very dangerous." "Mrs. Celeste, I've spent my whole life building buildings, creating structures for the future. But now I've discovered that my own past is built on a foundation of lies and suffering. I can't pretend I don't know anymore." Outside, the man in the dark suit continued to watch, now accompanied by another equally suspicious individual. The network of people interested in keeping the secrets buried was closing in quickly around Theodore and Lily. The departure from Mrs. Celeste's house was strategic. Theodore asked the retired nurse to call a taxi while he and Lily slipped out the back, crossing the yards of 3 neighboring houses before reaching a parallel street where the taxi was waiting for them. The men watching the house remained focused on the main entrance, not noticing their escape. "Where to now?" asked the taxi driver, a middle-aged man with grey hair. Theodore hesitated. He had no idea where to start looking for Eleanor Evans, but Lily leaned forward and said with conviction, "Peaceful Haven Clinic, on Acacia Street." The driver nodded and started driving, but Theodore was intrigued. "Lily, how do you know that name?" "The voices told me. Grandma is there, but she can't leave." "Ooh, the Peaceful Haven Clinic was in an older residential area of Cedar Creek, a 1-story white building surrounded by high walls and barred gates. It looked more like a prison than a health institution. When they arrived at the main gate, a uniformed security guard greeted them with suspicion. "Visiting hours are only from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m., he said dryly. "We're looking for information about a patient," Theodore explained, "Eleanor Evans. She may have been admitted here about 3 months ago." "I can't give out information about patients. Institution policy." Theodore was about to insist when Lily touched his arm and pointed to a small window on the 2nd floor of the building. "She's up there, in the room with bars on the window." The guard followed the girl's gaze, and his expression changed slightly, becoming more nervous. How would this child know about? "Look, you two need to leave now." "Wait," Theodore said, pulling a few bills from his wallet. "We just want to know if our relative is okay. Eleanor Evans, 62, grey hair." The guard looked at the money, then at Lily, who was staring at him with her large, penetrating eyes. "The lady is unwell. She can't receive visitors." "How long has she been here?" "About 3 months. She arrived with involuntary commitment papers. Mental problems, from what I was told." "Who brought her in?" The man hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "A well-dressed man with grey hair said he was a distant relative, had all the necessary legal documentation." Theodore's blood ran cold. The description perfectly matched Evan. "Can we at least see her from a distance, just to be sure she's okay?" The guard looked around, checking if anyone was watching. "There's a coffee shop across the street. From the 2nd floor there you can see the clinic's inner courtyard. At 3 p.m. the patients go out for some sun." Theodore thanked him and crossed the street with Lily. The coffee shop was small and cozy, and they got a table near the second-floor window with a direct view of the clinic's courtyard. While they waited, Theodore tried to process all the information he had discovered. "Lily, tell me more about your grandmother. What was she like? How did she take care of you?" "Grandma was very affectionate," Lily replied, fiddling distractedly with a napkin. "She worked cleaning big houses, but she always came home tired and sad. At night she would tell me stories about children who turned into stars." "Stories about children who turned into stars?" "She said that a long time ago, when she was young, she knew many children who went to heaven too early, and that they were now stars who looked after other children here on earth." Theodore felt a shiver. Eleanor Evans knew about the orphanage children, and she probably knew much more than his father's documents revealed. "Did she ever talk about the place she worked when she was young?" "She talked about a very big house where many children without parents lived. She said it was a sad place, where the children never really smiled." At 3 p.m. sharp, the doors to the clinic's inner courtyard opened, and about 15 people came out for some sun. Among them was a woman with grey hair, thin and hunched over, who walked slowly to a bench in the shade. "It's Grandma!" Lily exclaimed, pressing her face against the window glass. Theodore watched the woman carefully, even from a distance. It was clear she didn't look mentally ill. Her movements were controlled. She observed her surroundings attentively, and there was something in her posture that suggested she was there against her will. "Lily, we need to find a way to talk to her." "It won't be easy," a voice said from behind them. Theodore turned to see a man of about 40 approaching their table. He was tall, thin, with glasses and a friendly but concerned expression. "Sorry to intrude. My name is Dr. Marcus Calder. I'm a psychiatrist and, well, I couldn't help but overhear you talking about Mrs. Eleanor." "You know her?" Theodore asked, suspicious. "I do, and I know she shouldn't be in that clinic." Dr. Calder sat down at the table, lowering his voice. "May I ask a few questions? Are you her family?" Theodore quickly explained his connection to Lily and the search for the missing grandmother. Dr. Calder listened attentively, making a few notes in a small notebook. "Mrs. Eleanor arrived at the clinic 3 months ago with involuntary commitment papers signed by a supposed nephew," the doctor explained. "But from day one, I suspected something was wrong. She's lucid, oriented, and shows no symptoms of mental illness. So why is she still there? Because the documents are technically correct, and she has been medicated with strong sedatives that keep her subdued. I tried to question the commitment, but the clinic director said there were orders from above to keep the case quiet." Lily, who had been quiet, suddenly perked up. "Can you help us get Grandma out of there?" Dr. Calder observed her with interest. "You must be the Lily she always mentions. Mrs. Eleanor talks about you constantly. She's desperately worried." "What else does she talk about?" Theodore asked. "She always repeats that she has important information about children who were hurt in the past. She says she needs to protect her granddaughter from the same people who put her there." "Dr. Calder," Theodore said, making a decision, "I need to tell you something that might seem impossible to believe." Over the next 20 minutes, Theodore recounted everything. The documents found in his father's house, the discovery of the bodies in the cemetery, Evan's connection to Father Augustine, and Lily's special abilities. Dr. Calder listened in silence, occasionally asking specific questions. When Theodore finished, the doctor remained thoughtful for a few moments. "That would explain a lot," he said finally. "Mrs. Eleanor was brought here shortly after she went to the county clerk's office. The clerk told me informally that she had registered a will and left specific instructions about an envelope that should only be opened if something happened to her." "What kind of envelope?" "I don't know, but the clerk said she seemed very scared, as if she were being followed. Can you help us find this envelope? I can try, but first, do you want to talk to Mrs. Eleanor? I can arrange an unofficial visit after hours. Would that be risky for you? Dr. Calder smiled sadly. My conscience won't allow me to leave a sane person committed against her will. If there's really a conspiracy involving crimes against children, then any risk is worth it. At 6 p.m., when the activity at the clinic subsided, Dr. Calder led them through a side entrance of the building. Eleanor Evans was in a small, clean room, but with bars on the windows. When she saw Lily, her eyes filled with tears. "My little girl," she exclaimed, hugging the child tightly. "I thought I'd never see you again." "Grandma, why are you locked up in here?" "Because I found out things that important people didn't want me to know, my child. But now that you've found me, I can tell you everything." Eleanor looked at Theodore with gratitude. "Thank you for taking care of Lily. I knew someone would show up to help us." "What do you know about Father Augustine and the orphanage?" Eleanor took a deep breath. "I worked there when I was 16. I saw terrible things, and 3 months ago, when I heard they were going to build a shopping mall on that land, I tried to warn the authorities. That's when they brought me here." "A shopping mall?" Theodore felt the ground sway beneath his feet. His construction company had just signed a multi-million-dollar contract to build exactly that. A shopping center on the land adjacent to the cemetery. Eleanor's revelation about the shopping center hit Theodore like a hammer. He leaned against the wall of the room, trying to process the magnitude of what he was discovering. His own company, the construction firm he had inherited from his father and expanded with such pride, was about to desecrate a clandestine children's cemetery. "Mrs. Eleanor," he said in a trembling voice, "I need you to tell me everything you know about this mall project." The 62-year-old woman settled Lily on her lap and took a deep breath. 3 months ago, when I learned that Vance Construction had won the bid to build a commercial center on the land next to the cemetery, I was desperate. I knew what was buried there. "How did you know about the bid?" "I've been cleaning Councilman Marcus Thorne's office for 15 years. I heard him on the phone talking about how convenient it was that that problematic area would finally be resolved with a building on top." Dr. Calder leaned in, interested. "Mrs. Eleanor, do you remember the exact words you heard?" "I do. The councilman said, 'With the mall built there, no one will ever mess with that land again. The problems of the past will be buried forever.'" And then he laughed as if it were a joke. Theodore felt nauseous. Councilman Marcus Thorne was one of his construction company's main political supporters. He had facilitated several public contracts over the years, always claiming the company had the best projects and prices. "And what did you do when you found out?" "I tried to speak with you personally, but I couldn't get past your receptionist, so I went to the county clerk's office and registered the whole truth I knew in case something happened to me." "What truth?" Eleanor looked at Lily tenderly, then stared at Theodore with determination. "I saw Father Augustine killing sick children with injections. I saw him order them to be buried in that lot in the middle of the night. And I saw your father being forced to falsify certificates to say the children had been transferred to other institutions." The silence that followed was heavy. Theodore had to sit down, his legs no longer able to support him. "My father was being blackmailed. Father Augustine found out your father had very high gambling debts. He threatened to expose it and ruin his career if he didn't cooperate with the cover-up." Lily, who had remained quiet on her grandmother's lap, suddenly sat up straight. "Grandma, tell him about the man who came to get you." Eleanor hugged her granddaughter tighter. 3 months ago, right after I registered my testimony at the clerk's office, a man showed up at our house. He introduced himself as Evan Campbell, said he was a friend of Mr. Theodore. "Evan came to your house?" "He did. He said he knew I had information about old matters and that it would be better for everyone if I forgot those things. He offered me money to move to another city with Lily. And you refused. I refused. Then he said I seemed to be having mental problems, that maybe I needed medical treatment. He left my house with a smile that gave me chills. Dr. Calder was taking notes quickly. And the next day, the involuntary commitment papers showed up. Exactly. They said I was showing signs of delusion, that I was talking about imaginary crimes. Since I didn't have any close family besides Lily, it was easy for them to get the legal authorization. Grandma, Lily said softly, tell him about the envelope. Ah, yes. The day I went to the clerk's office, I left not only my testimony, but also copies of photographs I had kept for all these years. What photographs? Photos I took secretly of the clandestine cemetery being used, photos of Father Augustine with important men in the city, and a very special photo that shows your father being forced to sign false documents. Theodore shot up. Do these photos still exist? They do. They're all in a sealed envelope at the county clerk's office. But they can only be opened if I authorize it personally, or if something serious happens to me. How can we get access to that envelope? Dr. Calder interrupted. First, we need to get Mrs. Eleanor out of here legally. With the information she has, I can contest the commitment and request an independent psychiatric evaluation. How long will that take? If I can get a cooperative judge, maybe a few days, but what? But the people behind this won't just let her walk out. They will intensify their attempts to silence her. As if he had heard the doctor's words, Theodore's cell phone rang. It was Evan again. Theodore, I need you to come to the office now. We have an urgent meeting with investors for the mall project. What investors? Mayor Julian Crane, Councilman Marcus Thorne, and some important businessmen. They want to discuss some concerns that have arisen about the project. What kind of concerns? Rumors about irregularities on the land. Nothing substantial, but they want to make sure there will be no problems during construction. Theodore looked at Eleanor and noticed she had turned pale upon hearing the names mentioned. Evan, I can't go now. I'm taking care of some personal matters. Theodore? Evan's voice turned cold. This is not an optional meeting. There's a lot of money involved, and your presence is mandatory. If you don't show up in the next hour, the investors may consider it a breach of contract. And what if I decide to cancel the project? You can't cancel. You've already signed the contracts, you've already received part of the payment, and more importantly, you have legal responsibilities you can't just ignore. The call was cut, leaving Theodore in a panic. Eleanor held his hand. Mr. Theodore, this meeting is a trap. They want you away from here so they can transfer me to a more secure facility where no one can find me. What do I do? If I don't go, I could lose the company. If I go, I could be putting your lives at risk. Dr. Calder stood up. I have an idea. I know a human rights lawyer who can help us. He's dealt with cases of illegal commitment before and might be able to get a court order to protect Mrs. Eleanor. How long would that take? If we act now, we might get something by tomorrow morning. But you all need a safe place to spend the night. Lily, who had been listening intently, suddenly smiled. I know where we can stay. Where, little one? At Mrs. Celeste's house. The children told me she has a secret basement where no one will find us. Eleanor looked at her granddaughter in surprise. How do you know about secret basements? The voices told me they know a lot about safe places. Dr. Calder checked the hallway to make sure it was empty. We need to get out of here now. There's a clinic van that leaves at 7:30 p.m. to pick up medicine. I can hide you in there. And me? You're going to your meeting, Eleanor said firmly, but not as they expect. You'll go as someone who knows the truth and is no longer afraid to use it. But I don't have any evidence with me. The documents are stored in a safe place. You don't need evidence yet. You just need them to believe you know everything. That will buy us time for Dr. Calder to get the court order. Theodore realized the strategy made sense. If he could convince Evan and the others that he knew all the secrets, they might hesitate to act against Eleanor and Lily. All right, but first, let's make sure you're safe. Half an hour later, Theodore was saying goodbye to Lily and Eleanor at Mrs. Celeste's house, who had been shocked but was determined to help when she learned the truth. The basement Lily had mentioned really existed, an old part of the house's construction that had been forgotten for decades. "Father Theo," Lily said, hugging him tightly, "the children said to be careful. They feel that something very bad is going to happen at the meeting. Don't worry, little one. I'll just talk and be right back." But as he drove to the construction company's office, Theodore couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking straight into a trap that could destroy not only his life, but also the only evidence that could bring justice to the 23 children who died decades ago. The offices of Vance Construction had never seemed so menacing to Theodore. Located on the 10th floor of a commercial building in downtown Cedar Creek, the environment he had always considered his kingdom now felt like an arena where he would be judged by powerful men who kept terrible secrets. When he arrived at the meeting room, he found 5 men sitting around the mahogany table: Evan, Mayor Julian Crane, Councilman Marcus Thorne, a man he didn't recognize, and, to his complete surprise, Dr. Arthur Sterling, the same doctor Mrs. Celeste had mentioned as being responsible for treating the orphanage children decades ago. "Theodore," the mayor greeted with false enthusiasm. "Glad you could make it. Please, sit down." Dr. Arthur Sterling was now a man of about 80, frail but with still sharp eyes. When Theodore sat down, the doctor studied him with a disturbing intensity. "So you're Edward's son," Dr. Sterling said in a raspy voice. "You have your father's eyes, and we hope you also have his." "Prudence. What exactly are we talking about here?" Theodore asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Councilman Marcus Thorne, a portly man of 55, leaned over the table. "We're talking about preserving the future of our city, Theodore, and about protecting reputations that took decades to build." "Including your own reputation," Evan added. "Do you have any idea what a scandal it would be if certain historical information came to light now?" The man Theodore didn't recognize introduced himself. "I'm Gerald Stone, representative of the Mall's investment group. We've invested $50 million in this project based on guarantees that there would be no complications." Theodore felt his blood run cold. Gerald Stone was the name Eleanor had mentioned as the man who sold the original orphanage land years ago. "Mr. Stone," Theodore said carefully, "you're not just an investor, are you? You have an older connection to this area." Gerald's face hardened. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I'm talking about the fact that you were the janitor at St. Vincent's Home for Children. I'm talking about the fact that you know exactly what is buried in that ground." The silence that followed was deafening. Dr. Sterling was the first to speak. "Theodore, I see you've made some discoveries. That's understandable, but you need to understand that you're meddling with events from over 50 years ago, from a very different time." "Different how?" "A time when it was acceptable to murder children." "No one murdered anyone," the mayor exploded. "There were deaths from diseases, yes. There were difficult decisions made under extreme circumstances, but there were no intentional crimes." Evan stood up and walked to the window. "Theodore, your father understood that some truths are too dangerous to come to light. They destroy more lives than they save." "My father was blackmailed into participating in the cover-up. I found the documents he hid." Dr. Sterling sighed deeply. "Your father was a good man who found himself in an impossible situation, just as you are now." "What situation?" Gerald Stone opened a folder and spread documents on the table. These are the contracts you signed for the shopping center. Note, Clause 47B. Theodore examined the document and felt his stomach sink. The clause stipulated that any archaeological or historical discovery on the site would be the sole responsibility of the construction company, including costs of relocation, compensation, and possible lawsuits. This means, Gerald continued, that if you expose what you know, you will be personally responsible for losses that could reach $200 million. Your company, your personal assets, everything will be at risk. You tricked me into signing this? You signed it of your own free will, the councilman said, but we can offer a solution. What solution? The mayor leaned forward. We build the mall as planned. The buried antiquities are discreetly transferred to a suitable location during the excavation. No one needs to know the unpleasant historical details. Yeah, and in return, you become a minority partner with the investors. Instead of just building the mall, you get 20% of the profits for the next 30 years. We're talking about tens of millions of dollars. Theodore looked around the table, seeing the expectation on the men's faces. And if I refuse, Dr. Sterling answered in a cold voice, then you will find that the girl you are taking care of has serious psychiatric problems that require immediate institutionalization. Her grandmother, well, unfortunately, has suffered a severe mental deterioration and will need intensive care for the rest of her life. The threat was crystal clear. Theodore felt anger burn in his chest, but he forced himself to remain calm. I need time to think. You have until tomorrow morning, Evan said. After that, certain protective measures will need to be implemented. One last question, Theodore said, standing up. How many people know the truth about what happened at the orphanage? The men exchanged glances. Finally, Dr. Sterling replied, very few. Most have already passed on. All that's left are us here present, you, the old woman Eleanor, and unfortunately a child who has been conditioned by her grandmother to believe in fantasies. Conditioned? Gerald smiled coldly. Eleanor Evans worked at the orphanage for only 6 months when she was 16. She was a troubled girl with a tendency to invent dramatic stories to get attention. Unfortunately, she passed those tendencies on to her granddaughter. Theodore realized they had prepared an alternative narrative to discredit both Eleanor and Lily. If he went to the press or the police with the evidence, it would be their word against that of a mentally unstable old woman and a traumatized and influenced child. I understand, he said, heading for the door. We'll talk tomorrow. Theodore, Evan called as he was leaving, I hope you make the right decision for everyone involved. When Theodore reached the elevator, his hands were trembling so much he could barely press the button. The trap had been carefully constructed over decades. They not only had the means to silence the evidence, but also to financially destroy anyone who tried to expose them. In the parking garage, as he walked to his car, Theodore noticed 2 men in a black sedan watching him. A third man was leaning on a nearby motorcycle, clearly monitoring his movements. When he turned on his cell phone to tell Dr. Calder about the meeting's outcome, he found he had 15 missed calls from the doctor. He returned the call immediately. Theodore, thank God, something terrible has happened. What was it? They tried to transfer Mrs. Eleanor tonight to a psychiatric clinic in Chicago. I managed to stop them by claiming I needed a court order, but it's a matter of hours until they get the necessary paperwork. And the lawyer you mentioned? He went to the county clerk's office today to try to access Eleanor's envelope, but he found out the responsible clerk was transferred to another city yesterday. The envelope has disappeared. Theodore felt the world collapsing around him. In less than 24 hours, they had neutralized all the evidence, isolated the witnesses, and built a legal web that turned him from an investigator into a forced accomplice. Dr. Calder, get Mrs. Eleanor out of the clinic now, tonight. Take her to where Lily is hiding. That would technically be kidnapping. I'd lose my medical license. If you don't do it, she'll disappear forever, and so will Lily. The doctor was silent for a moment. All right, but this means we all become fugitives. Are you sure you want to go down this path? Theodore looked in the rearview mirror and saw the black sedan following him at a discreet distance. He thought of Lily, of her big, trusting eyes, of how she had called him Father Theo. He thought of the 23 buried children who never had the chance to grow, to love, to live. I'm sure, he said. Let's finish what we started. The rescue of Eleanor Evans from the clinic took place at 2 a.m. in a coordinated operation that tested everyone's nerves. Dr. Calder managed to lightly sedate her so she wouldn't protest during the transfer, while Theodore waited in a rental car 3 blocks away from the clinic. She's safe, Dr. Calder reported by phone when they finally arrived at Mrs. Celeste's house. But we need to talk urgently. I discovered something disturbing in her medical files. When Theodore arrived at the house, he found an impromptu meeting in the secret basement. Eleanor still drowsy but conscious, Lily clinging to her grandmother's arm, Mrs. Celeste serving tea to everyone, and Dr. Calder with a grave expression on his face. What did you discover? Theodore asked. Eleanor wasn't being kept in the clinic just to silence her, the doctor explained. They were giving her an experimental drug that causes gradual memory loss. What do you mean? It's a medication being tested for the treatment of severe trauma. In controlled doses, it can help patients forget traumatic memories, but in high doses, it causes permanent amnesia. Eleanor held Lily's hand tightly. I was already starting to forget things, names, dates, important details. A few more weeks, and I wouldn't remember anything about the orphanage. That's a crime, Mrs. Celeste said indignantly. It's worse than a crime, Theodore replied. It's the systematic erasure of the only living witness to the events. Lily, who had remained quiet, suddenly stood up and walked to one of the basement walls. There's something here, she said, pressing her palm against the brick wall. What is it, little one? Eleanor asked. There's a box hidden behind these bricks. The voices showed me. Mrs. Celeste approached, intrigued. This basement is very old. It belonged to the family who lived here before me. Theodore examined the area indicated by Lily and noticed that some bricks looked different from the others, as if they had been removed and replaced at some point. With Dr. Calder's help, they managed to carefully remove the bricks and found a cavity in the wall. Inside was a rusty metal box the size of a shoebox. When they opened it, they discovered it was full of old photographs, documents, and a handwritten letter. My God, Eleanor whispered, picking up one of the photographs. This is me at 16, at the orphanage. The photograph showed a young Eleanor next to several thin, sad children in front of the imposing building of St. Vincent's Home for Children. In the background of the image, partially obscured by shadow, was Father Augustine. Who hid these photos here? Theodore asked. Mrs. Celeste examined the handwritten letter. It's signed by Sister Carmela Rogers. She must have been one of the nuns who worked at the orphanage. The letter, dated 1965, revealed shocking details. I can no longer be an accomplice to what is happening in this institution. Father Augustine is not just neglecting the sick children, he is accelerating their passing with overdoses of morphine injections. I have witnessed this 3 times in the last 2 months. The children who die in their sleep are actually being eliminated to avoid medical costs and investigations into mistreatment. I am hiding this evidence in the hope that one day someone with more courage than I can bring justice. Euthanasia. Dr. Calder murmured. He was killing the children who became too sick or who could testify against him. Among the photographs, there was one that made Theodore freeze. It showed his father, young and visibly distressed, signing documents under the intimidating gaze of Father Augustine and two men in suits he didn't recognize. "My father looks terrified in this photo," Theodore observed. "He was," Eleanor confirmed. "Your father tried to refuse to falsify the documents several times, but Father Augustine had evidence of his gambling debts and threatened to destroy his career." Lily picked up a photograph showing children playing in the orphanage courtyard. "This girl here," she said, pointing to a little girl with curly hair, "is Rose, who talks to me. And this boy is John, who is buried near the tree." The naturalness with which Lily referred to the children in the photographs as if they were her friends continued to impress and disturb the adults. "There's one more thing," Eleanor said, taking an envelope from the box, "a list with the names of all the authorities who knew what was happening and agreed to keep silent." The list included names that took Theodore's breath away. Besides the current mayor and councilman, there were judges, prosecutors, and businessmen who were still alive and held positions of power in the city. "This conspiracy has spanned generations," said Dr. Calder. "The children and grandchildren of the original people continued to protect the secrets to preserve their family reputations. And to protect the investments," Theodore added. "Much of the city's real estate development in recent decades has happened in areas that likely hide similar evidence." Mrs. Celeste, who had been the quietest of the group, suddenly stood up with determination. "You know you can't fight this alone, right? These people have too much power, too much money." "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we need outside help. People who have no local connections, who can't be bought or intimidated." "Who?" "Investigative journalists from New York or D.C., human rights organizations, people who specialize in exposing institutional corruption." Theodore considered the idea. "But first we need to make sure this evidence doesn't disappear like the other." "I've already thought of that," said Dr. Calder. "I know a forensic lab in Columbus that can digitize and authenticate all these photographs and documents. If we create certified copies, it will be much harder to suppress the evidence." "And what about the land? The mall excavations start next week." Lily, who had been examining the photographs, suddenly brightened. "The children told me where there's more evidence, not just bones, but objects that prove they were intentionally harmed." "What objects?" "Empty medicine vials, syringes, and a box that the father hid with notes about each child he killed," Eleanor confirmed with a nod. "I vaguely remember seeing the father burying a metal box in a separate location from the bodies. He said it was for holy mementos, but I always found it strange. If we can find that box before the mall excavations begin," Theodore began. "It will be the definitive evidence," Dr. Calder completed. "First-hand records of the crimes." "But how are we going to dig without being detected? The site has been under 24-hour surveillance since yesterday." Lily smiled for the first time in days. "The children have already thought of that. They showed me a secret path." "What path?" "Through the drainage tunnels that run under the cemetery. There's an exit right in the middle of the area where the children are buried," Mrs. Celeste confirmed in surprise. "It's true. Those tunnels were built in the 50s to prevent flooding. The entrance is in the creek that runs behind my house." Theodore looked at the group gathered in the basement: a retired nurse, an idealistic doctor, a traumatized old woman, a child with extraordinary abilities, and himself, a businessman who had discovered his entire life was built on lies. "Are we really considering breaking into a cemetery through underground tunnels to dig up evidence of mass murder?" "We are," Eleanor replied firmly, "because those children deserve justice, even if it took 60 years to arrive, and because Lily added with her unsettling wisdom. If we don't do it now, the voices will fall silent forever, and they will forget they were ever real children. At that moment, everyone present understood they had crossed an irreversible line. They were no longer just investigators or curious onlookers. They had become the last defenders of 23 little souls who had been waiting for decades for someone brave enough to tell their story. The exploration of the drainage tunnels began the next morning before dawn, when the city was still asleep and the cemetery's surveillance was at its lowest point. Theodore, Dr. Calder, and Mrs. Celeste followed Lily through an almost invisible opening in the creek behind the retired nurse's house. The tunnels were wider than they expected, built in the 1950s with solid bricks and enough height for an adult to walk hunched over. Lily moved with surprising confidence in the dark, guiding them as if she had known the way for years. "How do you know where to go?" Theodore whispered, his flashlight illuminating the damp tunnel walls. "The children showed me many times in my dreams," Lily replied naturally. "They used to play here when they were alive. It was the only place they could escape from Father Augustine." After a 20-minute walk through the tunnels, they reached an area where Lily stopped abruptly. "It's here," she said, pointing up. "Right above us is a manhole that comes out in the middle of the buried children." Theodore pushed open the heavy iron manhole cover and peeked out. They were exactly where Lily had promised, in the center of the area she had identified as the clandestine cemetery. A few yards away, he could see the security lights that had been installed around the perimeter. "The father's box is buried there," Lily whispered, pointing to a specific spot near an old tree. 2 meters down, in an iron box with a religious symbol on top. Dr. Calder had brought improvised digging equipment, small shovels, gloves, plastic bags for evidence, and a camera to document everything they found. "If we're going to do this, we have to be quick and quiet." Eleanor, who had insisted on coming despite the others' protests, held Lily's hand. "My granddaughter, are you absolutely sure about the location?" "I am, Grandma. Rose is helping me. She remembers seeing the father digging here on a very cold night." The next 90 minutes were the most tense of Theodore's life. They dug in shifts, one always keeping an eye on security while the others worked. The earth was harder than they expected, compacted by decades of rain and trampling. When Dr. Calder's shovel hit something metallic, everyone froze. "I found it," he whispered. With extreme care, they removed the earth around it until a small briefcase-sized iron box was fully exposed. On the lid, crudely engraved, was an inverted crucifix, a symbol that made Eleanor cross herself nervously. "This isn't Christian," she murmured. "It's some kind of satanic ritual." Theodore photographed the box before trying to open it. It was locked, but rust had weakened the mechanism. With the help of an improvised screwdriver, they managed to force it open. The contents of the box were even more disturbing than they had imagined. There was a black leather-bound notebook, dozens of small empty glass vials, several old syringes, and something that almost made Dr. Calder vomit. Small personal items that had clearly belonged to the children, a teddy bear, a rag doll, a set of toy cars. "Trophies," Dr. Calder said with disgust. "He kept souvenirs of his victims." Theodore carefully opened the notebook. The first few pages were written in meticulous calligraphy in Latin, but the following pages were in English, and the content was nauseating. March 15th, 1959, Rose Miller, 7 years old, administered 20 milligrams of morphine. Peaceful departure during sleep, buried in Sector 3, Position 14, kept her teddy bear as a memento of a soul saved from the sufferings of this world. "He documented all the murders," Theodore whispered, flipping through page after page of similar entries. "Every child, every dose of poison, every burial location." Lily approached and gently touched the teddy bear. "This was Rose's. She's happy we found it. She said now she can rest in peace." Dr. Calder was photographing each page of the notebook when they heard voices approaching from outside the cemetery. "Someone's coming," warned Mrs. Celeste, who was on watch. They quickly put all the evidence in plastic bags and replaced the manhole cover. They had barely reached the tunnels when they heard the footsteps of several people walking directly above their heads. "Someone's been digging here," a gruff voice said. "The ground is turned over." "Impossible," replied another voice that Theodore recognized as Gerald Stone's. "This place has 24-hour surveillance. Then how do you explain these digging marks? Animals or rain? Tomorrow we'll cover everything with concrete. There can't be anything wrong when the official excavations begin." They waited in absolute silence in the tunnels for over an hour, until they were sure the men had left. When they finally emerged through the creek behind Mrs. Celeste's house, the day was breaking. "We did it," said Dr. Calder, still in a state of shock. "We have irrefutable evidence of 23 premeditated murders." "Now what?" asked Eleanor. "How do we use this without all of us ending up in prison for trespassing?" Theodore had thought about this during the entire operation. "Dr. Calder, you said you know investigative journalists?" "I do, Rachel Miles, from a major network in New York. She specializes in cases of historical corruption and crimes against children." "And she would come to Cedar Creek for this evidence?" "I'm sure of it, especially if she knew there are current politicians involved in the cover-up." Lily, who had been quiet during the conversation, suddenly turned pale and clung to her grandmother's arm. "Grandma, the children are warning me that the bad man is coming here, now." "What bad man?" "Dr. Sterling. He's in a black car with other men. They found out where we're hiding." As if it were a prophecy, they heard the sound of cars stopping in front of the house. Through the window, they saw 3 vehicles parked on the street. One of them was Evan's Mercedes. "How did they find us?" Mrs. Celeste asked in a panic. Dr. Calder checked his phone and paled. "My phone. They must be tracking my calls." "We have a few minutes before they try to get in," said Theodore, already organizing the evidence. "Mrs. Celeste, is there a back exit?" "Yes, but they've probably surrounded the house." Eleanor held Lily firmly. "My granddaughter, can the voices show us an escape route?" Lily closed her eyes for a moment, as if listening to something only she could perceive. "Yes, through the basement there's a tunnel the old family built during the war. It comes out in the neighbor's house." "What tunnel?" asked Mrs. Celeste, surprised. "I never knew about any tunnel." "It's hidden behind the shelf where they keep preserves," Lily explained. "The family used it to hide food during hard times." They ran to the basement and, exactly where Lily had indicated, found a disguised opening behind an old wooden shelf. The tunnel was narrow and low, but they could get through. By the time they heard the first violent bang on the front door of the house, they were already halfway through the tunnel. Evan's voice echoed clearly. "Mrs. Celeste, we know you're in there. Open this door or we'll break it down." They emerged in the basement of the neighboring house, fortunately empty, and slipped out the back without being detected. But as they ran through the still deserted streets at dawn, Theodore knew they couldn't hide forever. "Dr. Calder," he said when they stopped to catch their breath, "you need to call your journalist now. We have enough evidence to expose everything, but if they catch us before we make this public—" "I understand," the doctor replied, already dialing. "Rachel, it's Marcus Calder. I need you to come to Cedar Creek immediately. I have the story of the century, but it could disappear if we don't act in the next few hours." While Dr. Calder spoke with the journalist, Theodore looked at Lily and saw a surprising determination in her young eyes. This 4-year-old girl had become the key to unraveling one of the most terrible crimes in the city's history. "Are the children at peace now?" he asked. "Not yet," Lily replied. "They'll only rest when everyone knows the truth about what happened to them. When their names are remembered, not as victims, but as real children who deserved to live." Rachel Miles arrived in Cedar Creek on a chartered flight 6 hours after Dr. Calder's call. The 42-year-old journalist, nationally known for her investigations into institutional corruption, met the group at a discreet motel on the outskirts of the city where they had taken refuge after fleeing Mrs. Celeste's house. In 30 years of journalism, I have never seen such disturbing evidence, she said, after examining Father Augustine's notebook and the photographs found in the basement. This is not just a local crime. It's a scandal that could bring down several influential political families. Can you protect our safety? Theodore asked, watching out the motel window. Suspicious cars had passed through the parking lot 3 times in the last hour. I've already dispatched a private security team from New York. They'll arrive in 2 hours, Rachel replied, but we need to act fast. How much time do we have before the mall excavations begin? According to the original schedule, the machines move onto the site tomorrow morning, said Dr. Calder. If that happens, all physical evidence will be destroyed. Lily, who was sitting on Eleanor's lap, suddenly stirred. The children are worried. They feel that the bad men are planning something very bad. Rachel observed the girl with professional interest. Throughout her career, she had interviewed hundreds of traumatized children, but she had never met one like Lily, who spoke of supernatural experiences with the casualness of someone commenting on the weather. Lily, may I ask you a few questions? For the report? You can, but the children said it's better to wait until they are really safe. For now, they are still afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid of being forgotten again. Afraid that people won't believe their story. Rachel took careful notes. And what needs to happen for them to feel safe? They want their names to be read aloud, for people to know what they were called, how old they were, what their dreams were. Eleanor hugged her granddaughter, moved. For all these years, I carried the weight of knowing those children had been forgotten by history. Lily managed to give them a voice in a way I never could. Rachel's phone rang. It was her producer in New York. Rachel, the network wants you to do a live broadcast today, the voice on the other end said. The photos you sent have caused a stir with the network executives. They want to turn this into a special report. Today is too soon. I'm still gathering evidence. We have no choice. Sources within the Cedar Creek city government said an operation is being planned for tonight. They're going to try to arrest everyone involved for trespassing and destruction of evidence. Theodore felt his blood run cold. A police operation? Worse, the producer continued. A joint operation between local police and private security. They're claiming you're a terrorist cell trying to sabotage the city's economic development. That's absurd, Dr. Calder exploded. It is, Rachel agreed, but it's effective. If you're arrested before the report airs, it will be much easier to discredit the evidence. Theodore made a decision that would change everything. Then, let's broadcast now. Live from the ground where the children are buried. Theodore, that's very dangerous, Eleanor protested. It's our only chance. If we do the broadcast directly from the cemetery, with the evidence on site, it will be impossible to deny the truth. Rachel considered the idea. It's risky, but impactful. A live broadcast from the crime scene, with the evidence being presented in real time. The children want this, Lily said with conviction. They told me it's time to tell everyone the truth. An hour later, the improvised television crew had positioned themselves in the cemetery. Rachel had obtained an emergency authorization from the network for a special broadcast, while Theodore used his contacts to officially access the land, claiming the need for a technical inspection before construction began. We're live from the Oakwood Municipal Cemetery in Cedar Creek, Rachel began, her voice echoing across the national broadcast, where shocking discoveries reveal one of the most disturbing crimes in the country's recent history. The camera showed the land where Lily had located the buried bodies. while Theodore explained how he had discovered the truth through his father's documents and the testimony of Eleanor Evans. Here, where a luxury shopping center was supposed to be built, Rachel continued, are buried 23 children who were murdered between 1955 and 1965 at St. Vincent's Home for Children. The broadcast showed photographs from Father Augustine's notebook, with Rachel reading some of the most disturbing entries, names, ages, and methods of each murder, meticulously documented by the criminal himself. Lily appeared briefly in the broadcast, her small figure contrasting with the gravity of the situation. "The children wanted you to know they had dreams," she told the camera. "Rose wanted to be a teacher. John wanted to be a firefighter. Mary wanted to have a real doll." The reaction was immediate. During the broadcast, the network's phone lines were jammed. Viewers from all over the country called in, demanding more information, expressing outrage, and calling for investigations. But the local response was equally swift and threatening. "Theodore!" shouted Dr. Calder, pointing to the cemetery entrance. "They're here!" A fleet of police cars and private security vehicles had surrounded the cemetery. Among them, Theodore recognized Evans' Mercedes and an official city car. "This is a police operation," a voice announced through a loudspeaker. "Everyone present is under arrest for trespassing and disturbing the peace," Rachel continued broadcasting, even as the sirens grew closer. "As you can see, instead of investigating the crimes we are reporting, the local authorities prefer to try to silence the evidence." Evan appeared, accompanied by Councilman Marcus Thorne and two men in suits whom Theodore didn't recognize. His face was contorted with rage. "Theodore, you've destroyed everything," he yelled. 50 years of the city's development, hundreds of jobs, millions in investments, all ruined by the fantasies of a disturbed child. Fantasies. Theodore held up Father Augustine's notebook. Are these fantasies the detailed records of each murder? Forged documents, planted by you to sabotage the mall project. But the lie sounded weak even to the one who said it. The live broadcast had shown too much evidence, too many consistent testimonies, too many detailed documents to be fabrications. Councilman Marcus Thorne tried a different approach. "This is a matter for archaeologists and historians, not for journalistic sensationalism. If there are indeed ancient remains on this land, they will be treated with due respect." "After the mall is built on top of them," Eleanor interrupted, her voice trembling but determined. "After the evidence is destroyed forever." Lily positioned herself next to her grandmother and, to everyone's surprise, walked directly towards Evan. The man instinctively recoiled as the girl stared at him with her large, serious eyes. "The children have known you since you were little," she said. "They remember when you used to visit the orphanage with your mother. You were just a scared little boy who saw terrible things and couldn't do anything." Evan visibly paled. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. Your mother used to bring food to the children behind Father Augustine's back. And you saw some sick children disappear during the night. That's why your family moved away from the city." The silence that followed was deafening. Evan looked around, realizing that dozens of people, police officers, journalists, city officials, were hearing every word. "They told me," Lily continued with her devastating innocence, "that you spent your whole life trying to forget what you saw. But forgetting didn't make the children's suffering go away. It just made you part of the problem." At that moment, in front of the television cameras and a national audience, Evan Campbell finally broke. He fell to his knees in the middle of the cemetery and began to cry as he hadn't cried since he was a child. "I saw it," he confessed between sobs. "I saw Father Augustine killing the children. I was just a kid, I didn't know what to do. And when I grew up, it was too late to save anyone." Evan's on-camera confession created a chain reaction that no one had anticipated. In the days following the live broadcast, Cedar Creek became the epicenter of a national investigation that shook not only the city, but the entire state political system. Theodore watched from the windows of a hotel in New York, where they had been taken for safety, as news reports showed crowds gathering at the municipal cemetery. Flowers, toys, and candles had been placed on the spot where the 23 children were buried, creating a makeshift memorial that grew by the hour. "I've never seen such an intense public response," commented Rachel Miles, organizing the stacks of evidence that kept pouring in. After the broadcast, dozens of people had come forward with additional information about the orphanage and other similar cases in the region. Lily was sitting on the hotel bed, drawing in a new notebook Theodore had bought for her, but for the first time since they had met, her drawings weren't of sad birds. She was drawing smiling children playing in a sunny park. "The voices are different now," she said, without looking up from her drawing. "They're not crying anymore. They're happy." "Happy?" asked Eleanor, who had fully recovered from the effects of the drugs she had been given at the clinic. "Because finally someone knows their names. Because people are taking care of them, putting flowers where they sleep." Dr. Calder entered the room with news that changed everything once again. "The Department of Justice has taken over the case," he announced, "and they've obtained a court order for a full exhumation of the site." "What does that mean?" Theodore asked. "It means they're going to unearth all the bodies and conduct a full forensic analysis. DNA, cause of death, identification. Each child will have their name, surname, and date of birth officially registered." Eleanor became emotional. After 60 years, they will finally exist on paper again. "And there's more," Dr. Calder continued. "Doctor, Arthur Sterling was arrested yesterday trying to flee to Mexico. In his luggage, they found other notebooks with records of illegal medical experiments performed on the children." Theodore felt nauseous. "What kind of experiments?" "Testing of unapproved drugs, unnecessary surgical procedures, studies on pain resistance. The orphanage wasn't just a place of neglect. It was a torture laboratory." Lily stopped drawing and looked at Dr. Calder seriously. "The children already knew that. That's why they chose me to tell the story. Because they knew you would believe and would help." Rachel approached the girl. "Lily, can I ask you something? Now that the truth has come out, do you still hear the voices?" "I do, but they're saying different things. Before, they were asking for help. Now they're telling me about other children." "Other children?" "In other places, other cities where similar things happened. They want me to help those children too." Theodore and Eleanor exchanged worried glances. The idea that Lily might carry the weight of revealing similar crimes for the rest of her life was terrifying. "Little one," said Theodore, sitting next to her, "maybe it's time for you to just be a normal girl. Play, go to school, make friends your own age." "But the other children need help," Lily insisted. "They've been suffering for so long." "And they will be helped," Rachel assured her. "What you did here in Cedar Creek has set a precedent. There's now a national task force investigating old orphanages across the country. Your courage has inspired other people to speak up." As if to confirm the journalist's words, the phone rang. It was the State Attorney General. "Ms. Miles," the official voice on the other end said, "as a result of the Cedar Creek investigation, we've received 127 reports of similar cases in 34 different cities. I need to speak with the team that uncovered the first case." 2 hours later, they were in a video conference with officials from Washington, D.C. The Attorney General, accompanied by representatives from the Department of Justice and the FBI, wanted to understand exactly how the discovery had been made. "Mr. Vance," said the prosecutor, "we understand that it all started with documents left by your father. Is it possible that similar cases exist in other cities where your family did business? My father worked in several cities in Ohio when he was young, Theodore replied. It's possible he kept information about other cases. And the girl, Lily, the prosecutor continued, could her abilities be useful in other investigations? Eleanor stood protectively in front of her granddaughter. My granddaughter is not an investigative tool. She is a child who needs normal care. Of course, the prosecutor hurried to say, but if she could voluntarily help. She has already helped enough, Theodore interrupted firmly. Lily gave a voice to 23 children who had been forgotten for decades. That should be enough for any child. Lily, who had remained quiet during the conversation, suddenly stood up and walked to the computer screen. Mr. Prosecutor, she said in her clear voice, the children told me something important. What was that, dear? They said the most important thing is not to find where other crimes happened. The most important thing is to make sure they never happen again, that a child is never hurt like that again. And how can we do that? By taking better care of the children who are alive today, by listening when they ask for help, by believing them when they tell you bad things are happening to them. The silence that followed in the video conference was profound. The 4-year-old girl's wisdom had struck at the heart of the matter in a way no adult had managed to. That night, as Lily slept peacefully for the first time in months, without nightmares or disturbing voices, Theodore had a long talk with Eleanor about the future. Mrs. Eleanor, he said, I'd like to make a proposal. What proposal? I want to officially adopt Lily. Give her all the opportunities a child deserves, education, medical care, a stable family, and I want you to come live with us as the girl's grandmother. Eleanor was moved. Mr. Vance, that would be a dream. But what about your life, your company, your plans? My plans have completely changed in the last few weeks, he replied. I've discovered that building buildings doesn't give me half the satisfaction that taking care of a special child does. And the construction company? I'm going to transform it. Instead of building commercial developments, we're going to specialize in building shelters for orphaned children, safe, transparent places where situations like the orphanage can never happen. That's very noble, but is it financially viable? Theodore smiled. In the last 48 hours, I've received funding offers from 12 international human rights organizations. It seems the story of Cedar Creek has inspired a lot of people around the world. 3 days later, a special ceremony was held at the municipal cemetery in Cedar Creek. The 23 murdered children from decades ago were exhumed with all respect and care, their identities confirmed through forensic analysis and properly buried in a memorial built specifically to honor their memories. Lily was present, wearing a white dress and holding a bouquet of colorful flowers. When it was time to place the flowers on the memorial, she approached each individual grave and whispered something different. What are you saying to them? Theodore asked. I'm telling them that now they have beautiful names carved in stone, that people will come here to remember them, and that they will never be forgotten again. When the ceremony ended, Lily took Theodore's hand and looked back one last time. They are truly at peace now. Oh, she said, they're ready to be just happy children who play in the sky. And you, he asked, are you ready to be just a normal girl who plays here on Earth? Lily smiled, a genuine, joyful smile that lit up her entire face. I'm ready to be your daughter, Father Theo. At that moment, Theodore understood that all the pain and trauma of the past few weeks had been worth it. Not just for the 23 children who finally received justice, but for the extraordinary child who had entered his life and taught him that true love sometimes comes in the most unexpected packages. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment on what you thought of my story with a rating from 0 to 10. And thank you very much.